My daughter fell in love with my fiance, and he eloped with her on my wedding day. They say the worst kind of betrayal comes from those you would have died for. I never understood that phrase until the morning I was supposed to become a wife, and instead became a ghost at my own wedding. My name is Clarissa Monroe. I'm 46, a successful interior designer from Savannah, Georgia. For most of my life, I raised my daughter, Ivy, on my own. Her father left before she was born, and I never looked back. Ivy was my everything, my reason, my rhythm, the girl I shielded from every storm. But what I didn't know was that the worst storm was already inside my house. The day started like a dream. The venue was glowing. The string quartet was tuning. I stood in my bridal suite, wrapped in white lace and nervous excitement, staring at the mirror like a girl half my age. My fiancé, Daniel Cross, was the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room, charming, brilliant, the kind of handsomeness that made women forget their names. We met through work. He was a high-end architect with a crooked smile and a past he never liked to talk about. I thought we were perfect together. My friend said he adored me. My daughter? She was distant lately, but I chalked it up to growing pains. She had just turned 22. She was finding herself, I thought. The ceremony was set for 3 p.m. At 2:47, the planner knocked on the door with a pale face. She was holding an envelope. "Clarissa," she whispered, "this was left in the groom's suite." I smiled politely, assuming it was a last-minute love note. I opened it. I read it 3 times before my legs gave out. "Clarissa, I can't marry you. I'm in love with Ivy. We didn't mean for it to happen, but we can't pretend anymore. Please don't try to find us. By the time you read this, we'll be gone." I dropped the paper. My hands were shaking. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. The planner was still speaking, something about delaying the ceremony, calling someone, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of blood rushing in my ears. Ivy. My daughter. My baby girl. And Daniel. My fiancé. Together. Gone. The guests sat in confusion for over an hour before I finally emerged. I didn't explain. I didn't cry. I simply said, "There won't be a wedding today. I'm sorry," and left through the back entrance, veil still pinned to my head. I disappeared after that. For 3 months, I refused to speak to anyone but my lawyer. Not even my closest friends knew where I went. But grief, when it burns hot enough, turns to something else. Something cold. Focused. You see, they thought they had humiliated me. But I was just getting started. If you're still reading, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Your support helps me bring more stories like this to life. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own child stole your fiancé? Where are you watching from? I don't remember how I got home that night. I only remember the silence. How the streets of Savannah blurred through my windshield like a funeral procession. My bouquet sat untouched in the passenger seat, its petals wilting under the weight of what was never said. And when I stepped into the house, our house, I half expected to hear Ivy humming upstairs, or Daniel pacing the kitchen, nervously practicing his vows. But there was only stillness. Only me. Only the wreckage. In the following days, the world tried to comfort me in the way people do when they're grateful they aren't the ones bleeding. My friends left messages. My sister flew in from Charleston and knocked for 20 straight minutes while I lay curled on the floor. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because what do you say when the 2 people you loved most chose each other and left you behind? The newspaper ran a soft piece on a postponed wedding after the venue leaked the story. They didn't mention the note. They didn't mention my daughter. But I knew. Somewhere, Ivy and Daniel were sipping wine on a honeymoon meant for me. I imagined them laughing in silk sheets, calling it fate. I imagined Ivy wearing the perfume I gifted her last Christmas, the one Daniel once said reminded him of wildflowers. It was all so absurd, so grotesque, I nearly tore down every picture in the house. But I didn't. Because something colder than heartbreak had started to settle in me: curiosity. How long had it been going on? When had they crossed that line from daughter and almost stepfather to lovers? And more importantly, why didn't I see it? I began looking at old texts, photos, voicemails. At first, it was denial dressed in desperation. But then patterns emerged. A glance too long. A message that said "miss you" sent at midnight. Ivy's sudden need to stay home from family dinners, only for Daniel to excuse himself around the same time. A photo from a ski trip, Daniel's hand resting just a little too low on Ivy's waist. I had seen it all before. I just hadn't let myself believe it. One night, I finally opened the hidden folder on my laptop that Daniel once used for work. It was password protected, but I knew him too well. The passcode was Ivy's birthday. Of course it was. Inside were emails, secret bookings, flight confirmations under false names. One email stopped my heart: booked the villa in Santorini. It's beautiful. She'll be heartbroken, but she'll recover. We'll finally be free. I love you, Ivy. He had written that 2 weeks before our wedding. And Ivy had replied, I feel guilty, but I want this. I've always wanted you. I'm done pretending to be her daughter when I'm really yours. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I printed every email, every photo, every timestamp. I laid them out on the dining table like puzzle pieces. And I whispered to myself, you took everything from me. But I will take something from you too. I called my lawyer the next day. And I called someone else too, an old college friend, now an investigative journalist. It was time to turn heartbreak into headlines. Some betrayals bleed. Others rot in silence, eating away at the walls of your mind until every thought stinks of revenge. That was me in the weeks that followed. The more I stared at those printed emails, the more I understood, I wasn't just the abandoned bride. I was the fool they thought would crumble quietly. They underestimated me. They thought my silence was surrender. But really, it was strategy. I started with what I knew: Daniel's obsession with luxury and secrecy. He hated public displays. Always said real love doesn't need an audience. I used to think it was romantic. Now I saw it for what it was: cover. Ivy, on the other hand, had grown up under my rules, my protection, my attention. She'd learned to lie with a smile, to steal under the disguise of innocence. It made them perfect for each other. I called my college friend, Dana Mills. She had once been the wild journalist who exposed a senator's double life in college. Now she was an investigative reporter for a regional news network. When I told her the short version of what had happened, she didn't gasp or ask questions. She simply said, tell me everything. And send me whatever you've got. I did. Emails, photos, the note they left behind, old messages I'd recovered from my iCloud backup, every breadcrumb. Dana's reply came within a day: Clarissa, I think this is bigger than heartbreak. This is scandal. Let me help you burn it down. With her help, we began piecing together their trail. Dana used public records and travel logs to find something I hadn't expected to see so quickly: a marriage certificate, filed 2 weeks after my wedding day. Not only had they eloped, they had done it in Charleston, under assumed names. Daniel was listed as David Cross. Ivy signed as Isabel Monroe. But their signatures, those were real. And the witnesses? 2 names I didn't recognize, but Dana did. They were Airbnb hosts in South Carolina. A couple who confirmed, over a recorded phone call, that Ivy and Daniel stayed in their waterfront property the week of the elopement. The wife even remembered Ivy gushing about finding love in the most unexpected place. She thought they were an older man and his young second wife. The kind you pity. Not the kind you report. But I wasn't done. Dana dug deeper. We found receipts for jewelry. A second ring. Ivy's Instagram was private, but not airtight. She had a second account she used to stalk people, and I knew her old handle. One search, and there it was, a blurry beach selfie of two hands clasped. Hers with an engagement ring. His with a wedding band. The caption read, "Finally where we belong. No more lies." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, wanting to scream into the comment box. But I didn't. Instead, I saved the photo. Like I had saved all the others. Because every lie they posted was just another nail in the coffin I was building, for their reputations, their comfort, their perfect new world. By the time I stood in front of my fireplace that evening, holding the copy of their marriage license, I didn't feel grief anymore. I felt clear. Cold and clear. They thought they'd run off into a fairy tale. But I was going to give them a press release from hell. And the headline would be, "Mother left at the altar reveals her daughter's secret marriage to her fiancé." Revenge doesn't always start with rage. Sometimes, it starts with planning a dinner party. That's what I did. The invitation list was short, exclusive. Just enough to spark a whisper. I made sure to invite former colleagues of Daniel's, a few members from the firm he left behind in Savannah, and some women who used to brunch with me, women who loved gossip more than dessert. No one knew why I was hosting again, not after everything. But curiosity is a powerful magnet. And I knew exactly how to feed it. The night of the party, I wore red. Deep, bold, impossible to ignore red. My hair was pinned up the way Daniel used to love, and I greeted everyone with a glass of chilled wine and a smile that made people lean in closer. "You look incredible, Clarissa," one of the architects from Daniel's firm said. "We weren't sure if we'd hear from you again after, you know." "Oh, I know," I said sweetly. "But I figured it was time to reconnect. There's something I'd love to share with you all soon." I let the sentence hang in the air like perfume. The truth was, I didn't need them to love me. I just needed them to talk. And they did. By the end of the night, I had learned Daniel had quietly resigned from his firm a week before our wedding. No explanation, no farewell. Just an email. But the most valuable nugget came from a woman named Elise, a junior designer who had once called me her mentor by marriage. She leaned in while sipping her second glass of wine and said, "Clarissa, I didn't want to say anything back then, but Ivy used to drop by the office when you weren't around. Daniel always said she was there to shadow him, but it felt off. They were always whispering. Once, I walked in on them in the conference room alone. Ivy was sitting on his lap. I smiled. Did anyone else ever notice that? Everyone did, she said. But no one said anything. He was your fiancé. I thanked her warmly. Inside, I felt something harden. After the guests left, I took off my shoes and sat by the window, watching the streetlight glow spill across the pavement. I thought about how easily love makes us blind. I thought about the day Ivy told me she'd never get married because she didn't believe in fairy tales. I thought about how Daniel used to say my laugh made him feel young again. They were building a life on my memories. And I was going to use those same memories to bury them. Over the next few weeks, Dana and I worked like shadows. She reached out to Ivy's former college roommate, a girl named Paige, who had been cut out of Ivy's life mysteriously 2 years ago. Turns out, Paige had caught Ivy cheating on a boyfriend, and that boyfriend wasn't Daniel, but another older man. Paige had been suspicious of Ivy's daddy issues, as she called them. She always chased men who looked like Clarissa's type. It was weird. Obsessive. That was the word I'd been avoiding, obsessive. My daughter hadn't just fallen for Daniel. She had wanted my life. My man. My fairy tale. And she had stolen it with manicured fingers and doe eyes and just enough guilt to make him cave. And Daniel? Daniel was always weak. He just wore charm like armor. But I knew what was underneath. The final piece came one morning when I walked past my front porch and found a small envelope. No stamp. No address. Just my name, scribbled in Ivy's handwriting. Inside was a photo of her and Daniel at some beachside restaurant. A sticky note attached, "You're not invited." Stop looking. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because if she was warning me, it meant she was scared. Good. Let the quiet fire begin. They thought I'd go quietly. That's what betrayal does, it blinds the guilty into thinking silence is surrender. But I'd been raised by women who survived on whispers, who stitched their pain into power. I wasn't going to scream or slash tires. No. I was going to make them famous. The plan was simple. Dana crafted an article, just suggestive enough to set fire to Savannah's curiosity, but vague enough to protect me legally. It was published under her editor's pseudonym on a popular gossip blog. The headline read, "Savannah bride left at the altar, fiance elopes with a secret family member weeks later." No names. No photos. Just enough detail to stir the pot. A high-profile interior designer in Savannah was reportedly left on her wedding day when her fiancé vanished moments before the ceremony. Sources say he has since secretly married someone closely related to the bride, leading to speculation of long-hidden family scandal. Within hours, the post went viral. Savannah is small when it comes to secrets. The city socialites sipped wine and whispered guesses. My inbox filled with screenshots and questions. Was this about you? Oh my God, Clarissa, please tell me this isn't true. Do you need anything? I responded to no one. The silence made the noise louder. Ivy, on the other hand, broke first. Her second Instagram account, yes, the one with the beach photos, suddenly vanished. And her main profile went into lockdown. But not before a few curious followers left comments under her last post. Is this about your mom's wedding? Homewrecker much? Y'all are sick. Daniel's LinkedIn began showing signs of trouble too. His endorsements began to disappear. A few colleagues unfollowed him. A former client commented, "Hope your personal life isn't as messy as the rumors suggest." Daniel deleted his profile within the week. But this was just the beginning. I needed more than shame. I needed exposure. So I called in another favor, from a local event planner named Mara, who owed me from back when I redesigned her entire studio in exchange for trade. She was hosting a bridal expo in Savannah, and I asked for a discreet slot at the speaker's brunch. I don't want to sell anything, I told her. I want to tell my story. She paused. Clarissa, this isn't about revenge, is it? I smiled. No. It's about truth. She agreed. 2 weeks later, I walked into the ballroom of the Grand Oak Hotel in heels that clicked like gunshots. The audience didn't know what to expect. I was introduced as a woman with a unique story of resilience and survival in love. Dana sat in the back with a camera. Not a professional crew, just her phone, angled just right. When I took the mic, the room fell into that tense hush people wear when they're unsure whether to cry or clap. I didn't use names. Not yet. But I told the story, honestly, elegantly, precisely. I said, I was in love. I was set to marry a man who said all the right things. But on the day of my wedding, I found a note instead of a groom. He had eloped, with my daughter. My only child. The one I raised alone. The one I would have died for. She married the man who once kissed me goodnight and promised forever. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. I paused, letting the silence ache. I'm not here to shame them. They've already done that themselves. I'm here to say, even when your world falls apart in the most unthinkable way, you can rebuild. Piece by piece. And sometimes, the best revenge is being the one who lived to tell the story. People stood. Applause, tears, clapping that swelled like thunder. And Dana? She uploaded that speech, unedited, under the title, "The Wedding Speech That Exposed the Biggest Betrayal in Savannah History." By morning, it had 200,000 views. Ivy and Daniel couldn't block that. This wasn't a story anymore. It was a spotlight. And I wasn't stepping out of it. It was 3:12 a.m. when my phone rang. I was already awake. Grief does that sometimes, even months later. You forget how to sleep when the people who once held your heart are the reason it broke. I picked it up without even checking the name. I don't know why. Maybe I already knew. Maybe some part of me had been waiting. Mom. It was Ivy. Her voice, small and sharp, like glass just before it cracks. I didn't say anything. She waited 2 seconds. 3. Then snapped. What the hell are you doing? Still, I said nothing. You've humiliated us. Do you know what people are saying? Do you even care that I'm getting death threats? That people are calling me a homewrecker and a whore and worse? I let her words hang, hollow and hissing. It was strange hearing her speak like that, furious, flailing, almost like a child caught with sticky fingers. Not the cool, calculated version of Ivy I'd always known. Not the girl who could lie without blinking. You posted that video, didn't you? She said. I didn't post anything, I replied calmly. A friend did. Don't play smart with me, she spat. You knew it would go viral. You wanted it to. Why would you do this to me? That was the moment something inside me snapped clean, not from pain, but from clarity. To you? I whispered. You think this is something I did to you? I stood up, walked toward the window, the city lights flickering in the distance like stars refusing to sleep. You stood in front of a man I was about to marry, I said slowly, and let him undress you with the same hands that once promised me a future. You married him in secret, wore a dress I probably paid for, smiled in photos meant to replace me, and now you're angry because people know? Silence. I'm not the villain, Ivy. I'm just the narrator. Her voice cracked. You're ruining our lives. You ruined mine first. There it was. The moment the truth took its first breath. She was quiet for a long time. And then she said something so low I barely caught it. We didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed. Not bitter, not cruel, just sad. You don't fall into bed with your mother's fiance by accident, Ivy. You jumped. We're in love, she said softly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hurl the phone across the room. But instead, I said the words I'd rehearsed in my head for months. Then love him. Stay with him. Build a life out of what you've taken. But don't you ever, ever, call me again expecting sympathy. She started to say something else. I hung up. And then I blocked her number. That same morning, I booked a venue. Not for a wedding. For a press conference. One that would change everything. The world had only seen the surface. A wedding gone wrong. A mother betrayed. A daughter in scandal. But what I had, the files, the footage, the letters, the private recordings Dana helped me secure, those would do more than tell the story. They would end it. Because if Ivy thought a viral video was bad, she hadn't seen the storm I'd been building. There's something poetic about revenge that arrives with confetti. I had stood in front of flowers, candles, and guests once before, waiting to be loved. Now I would stand in front of cameras, microphones, and questions, waiting to be heard. No veil. No bouquet. Just truth, sharp as glass and twice as unforgiving. The venue I chose was symbolic. It was the exact same hall where my wedding was supposed to take place. Still pristine. Still beautiful. I walked through it with the event manager, my heels tapping across the floor like punctuation marks. I remember you, she said softly. You were the one left at the altar. I smiled. I'm the one who walked away from it. She blinked, unsure whether it was bitterness or grace. Maybe both. I booked the hall for a Thursday afternoon, 2 months from that call with Ivy. That gave Dana and me time to do what we needed to do, dig. Prep. Prepare the perfect storm. Our plan was simple. The press conference wouldn't just be a speech. It would be an exposé, complete with digital files, video snippets, testimonials, and evidence laid out like a courtroom case. I wasn't just telling the world what happened, I was showing them. Piece by piece, Dana helped me build a media packet. It had a copy of the marriage certificate, screenshots of messages between Ivy and Daniel, taken legally from my own shared iCloud account, emails from Daniel's private folder, and witness statements from two people willing to go on record: Paige, Ivy's ex-roommate, and Elise from Daniel's firm. We even had photos, blurry, yes, but unmistakable, of Daniel and Ivy kissing months before our wedding, outside a restaurant I had once picked for our anniversary dinner. I want every major local news outlet invited, I told Dana. And two national ones, she nodded. Just in case. I also started making my own guest list. Not journalists, not reporters, people. The ones who had sat quietly during my humiliation. Former friends who hadn't called. Family members who had sent awkward texts but never asked if I was okay. I wanted them in the room, not for vengeance, but so they'd remember which woman stood when everyone expected her to fall. And yes, I sent invitations to Daniel and Ivy. An elegant cream envelope. No return address. Just a gold seal with one line inside: "You stole my wedding. Let me return the favor." Date. Time. Location. The hall could hold 120 guests. We filled every seat. As the date approached, I began receiving messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Is it true? Are you really going to do it? Clarissa, maybe just let it go. But letting go was never the point. I had already let go of Daniel. I had mourned my daughter. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about power. About walking back into the place where I was supposed to say I do, and instead saying, I did survive. And now? It was their turn to sit and watch me. The sky that morning was overcast, the kind of silver gray that makes everything feel like a paused breath. I arrived 2 hours before the press conference, not out of nervousness, but preparation. The room had already been staged. Rows of white chairs. A single podium. 2 large projection screens set up behind it, each ready to play exactly what needed to be seen. I wore a navy blue suit, tailored, sharp, unapologetic. Not white. Not soft. I wanted them to see a woman who had shed mourning-like skin and stepped into something stronger. My heels echoed through the space as I walked to the front, just like I had done on my wedding day, only this time, there would be no broken promises waiting at the end of the aisle. Dana greeted me with a curt nod. Everything's queued. The press is arriving. And, she paused, they're here. I followed her eyes to the back entrance. Daniel. Ivy. They entered separately, which surprised me. He looked tense, like a man trying to hide sweat under designer cologne. Ivy wore sunglasses, though we were indoors, and her hair was curled in waves that looked too polished, too deliberate. She was playing defiance, but her fingers trembled as she signed in at the door. A few reporters turned to stare. One snapped a photo. Ivy flinched. Did they RSVP? I asked Dana quietly. No, she said. But I mailed their invitations with tracking. I knew they'd show. They took seats in the back row. Not together. And I noticed Daniel glance at her only once, with something almost like regret. Almost. The room filled fast. Reporters, bloggers, wedding vendors, curious strangers. A few former clients. Even Elise, the junior designer, sat near the aisle, her eyes wide with anticipation. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked onto the stage. No introduction. No fanfare. Just silence. I looked at the crowd, then straight at the camera, and began. Some of you know me. Many of you don't. My name is Clarissa Monroe. I was supposed to be married here, in this very room, nearly a year ago. But I was left at the altar. A murmur moved through the crowd like a breeze. My fiancé didn't run away with an old flame. He didn't die in an accident. He left me, for my daughter. Gasps. Audible this time. I let them echo. I gestured to the projector. Let me show you. Slide after slide began to roll. Emails. Photos. The marriage certificate. Footage of Ivy and Daniel kissing in the parking lot, timestamped 6 weeks before the wedding. A snippet of a voice memo Dana recovered from a mutual acquaintance, where Ivy drunkenly bragged, "He doesn't love her anymore. He loves me. I was always better than her." I didn't flinch. I didn't look back. Instead, I continued, "They said it was love. They said I'd get over it. They asked me to stay quiet, for the sake of family. But silence is not grace. And forgiveness should never be forced." I paused. I'm not here to ruin anyone. I'm here to remind everyone, especially women like me, that betrayal doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. And awareness is dangerous. The final slide came on, a photo of me, in my wedding dress, alone at the altar. And beneath it, in bold, she was supposed to be the bride. They were supposed to be guests. Instead, they rewrote the story. I stepped back from the mic. The room exploded in applause. Some stood. Some cried. Daniel had his head in his hands. Ivy had removed her sunglasses. She was crying too, but not in shame. In disbelief. Because for the first time, she realized this wasn't a private mess anymore. It was a public reckoning. And I was no longer a victim in her story. I was the author. The applause still rang in my ears hours after I left the venue. It wasn't the kind of sound you forget, it was the kind that etches itself into your bones. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a woman who had been left behind. I felt like a woman who had taken back the narrative. And by morning, the entire country knew it. The video from the press conference was posted to 3 major social platforms by Dana and her team. We thought it might gain traction locally, maybe a few thousand views. But by 10 a.m., it had surpassed 2 million. By noon, my name was trending. Headlines popped up like wildfire. Small Blue Diamond, Savannah bride's stunning press conference exposes affair between her daughter and fiance. Small Blue Diamond betrayed at the altar. One woman's viral comeback. Small Blue Diamond wedding gone wrong turns into national scandal. With family at the center, I received hundreds, no, thousands, of messages. From women I'd never met. From men whose daughters had betrayed them. From brides who had been left, mothers who had been shamed, and strangers who simply wanted to say, "Thank you for speaking the truth we were too afraid to tell." There were media requests. Talk shows. Radio interviews. Invitations to speak at women's conferences. I turned most of them down. I wasn't interested in being a celebrity. I was interested in being free. But not everyone was clapping. Ivy's world began to unravel faster than even I expected. She lost her job within 48 hours. The nonprofit she worked for released a statement, due to recent revelations surrounding her personal conduct. Ms. Ivy Monroe is no longer affiliated with our organization. Her face was plastered on every gossip site, every hate comment thread. She posted a weak apology video, tears and all, begging people to stop bullying her. But people weren't buying it. The comment section was savage. "You destroyed your mother's life. And for what? Who does that to their own family? She raised you. You stole her future." Daniel didn't fare better. He tried to spin a story, some nonsense about falling in love unexpectedly and emotional complexity, but by then, one of his ex-clients had come forward, claiming he'd once hit on her too, while engaged to me. More followed. His architecture firm removed him from their alumni listings, and a few projects mysteriously got reassigned. His reputation? Shattered. And yet, the part that stunned me most was how Ivy reacted. She sent another letter. Handwritten. Delivered through a third party. No return address. Inside was one sentence, "You win." No apology. No remorse. Just bitterness wrapped in surrender. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. And I realized something, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. Because revenge doesn't always heal. But truth? It cleans the wound. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I wasn't done yet, but I wasn't chasing them anymore. The world had seen what I needed it to see. And they had finally paid for what they'd done. But what they didn't know was that I still had one more card to play. Something neither of them saw coming. A truth deeper than betrayal. And a consequence written in their own handwriting. By now, I thought I had uncovered everything. Every kiss stolen in the dark, every lie whispered behind my back, every vow rewritten in someone else's handwriting. But betrayal has layers, like rot beneath paint. You don't know how deep it runs until you start peeling. It started with a call from my accountant. His name's Walter. Old school, discreet, the kind of man who still mails paper statements and believes in shaking hands. I hadn't spoken to him since before the wedding chaos. But now, out of nowhere, he left a voicemail. "Clarissa, there's something odd I think you should look at. Call me back when you can." I returned his call immediately. Walter's voice was tight with discomfort. "I was reviewing your annual portfolio ahead of tax season," he said, "and I noticed a series of withdrawals last spring, 5 figures each. They were made from your long-term investment fund. The one we set up for your retirement." I froze. That fund has been untouched for over a decade. That's what I thought. But the withdrawals were authenticated. Authenticated by who? He hesitated. "Someone using your power of attorney." My heart dropped. It couldn't be. I had never signed over that power. Never. Unless. "I sent the signature documents to a forensic analyst," Walter added, almost like he was afraid of what he was about to say. "They don't match your handwriting. But they match someone else's on record." A pause. Ivy's. It felt like ice water poured into my chest. Ivy, my daughter, my betrayer, hadn't just stolen my fiance. She had stolen my future. And worse? Daniel had notarized it. I requested the documents. They arrived by courier in a crisp envelope. Inside was the fake power of attorney form, complete with my forged signature, Daniel's witness initials, and the dates of withdrawal. They had moved the money into a joint account, one listed under Cross and Monroe Holdings, a shell name they created to hide their little operation. I sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the pages. All this time, I'd believed the affair was the betrayal. But it was only the beginning. While I was buying wedding favors and designing floral arrangements, they were looting me in the background. Every stolen dollar felt like a slap across the face. They thought I'd never find out. They thought I'd be too broken to bother checking. And that's where they miscalculated again. Because what they had done wasn't just immoral, it was criminal. I took the files straight to Dana. She read them, then looked up slowly, eyes wide. "You realize this changes everything," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "It's not just a scandal now. It's a felony." We contacted a lawyer. One who specialized in financial fraud. She nearly clapped her hands when she saw the files. Forgery. Identity theft. Financial abuse. Misuse of power of attorney. And since he was your fiancé, and she your daughter? Oh, this will explode in court. But I didn't want a private trial behind closed doors. I wanted the world to know. And just like that, the next phase of my plan was born. The press conference had exposed the love story. Now it was time to expose the crime. And this time? There'd be charges. You can lie about love. You can fake devotion. You can even fool the world for a while with the right lipstick, the right captions, the right smile. But bank transfers? Power of attorney forms? Investment withdrawals? Those don't lie. They don't weep. They don't ask for forgiveness. They leave digital footprints and paper trails, truths that can't be rewritten. Within 72 hours of meeting with the fraud attorney, I filed a formal complaint. Ivy and Daniel were now not just the subjects of a viral scandal, they were the targets of a criminal investigation. My attorney, Liza Kane, was brilliant. She crafted every detail of the case like a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Calm. Exact. Ruthless. The moment the forged documents were handed over to the district attorney's office, a domino chain began. First came the formal notice of investigation. Then subpoenas for banking records. And then a quiet but unmistakable message sent to their home: "You are under review for felony fraud and identity theft." I didn't make that part public, yet. But what I did make public: the full financial story. Dana helped publish an article titled, "Betrayal Beyond the Altar: How a Daughter and Her Mother's Fiance Stole Her Retirement Savings While Planning a Wedding." This wasn't just gossip now. This was news. The article included screenshots of the forged documents, with identifying details redacted, quotes from legal experts, and a timeline of the withdrawals. The final paragraph made my hands tremble when I read it. "The woman once abandoned at the altar is no longer simply a victim of heartbreak, she's a survivor of calculated fraud. And now, she's fighting back with facts, not tears." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't. The article went viral before dawn. Every major news outlet picked it up. People were stunned. The betrayal, already emotional, had now become financial and criminal. My story made national television. Talk show hosts debated the ethics. Legal commentators speculated jail time. And Ivy? She deactivated every account she had. Daniel's face, once featured in design magazines, was now attached to headlines like, "Small Blue Diamond from Blueprints to Bars," "Small Blue Diamond, the Architect of Fraud," "How Daniel Cross Built a Future on Lies," "Small Blue Diamond, Mother Scorned Uncovers $1 Million Betrayal by Daughter and Fiance." But the real moment, the one I will never forget, was when Ivy showed up at my door. Not with a smirk this time, but with a lawyer. She didn't even make eye contact. She stood behind the woman in a beige blazer who handed me a letter. "Miss Monroe, my client wishes to settle this matter privately. She's prepared to return the full amount, issue an apology, and release a public statement of remorse, in exchange for the charges being dropped." I looked Ivy dead in the eye. She didn't speak. She couldn't. So I answered for her. "No." The lawyer blinked. You don't want the money back?" "Oh, I'll get the money," I said. But not through her apology. I stepped forward, slow and sure. "She stole my fiancé. Then she stole my future. But the one thing she doesn't get to steal is the lesson. She will answer to the law." I shut the door in her face. And the very next morning, I filed civil charges, in addition to the criminal case. Because I didn't just want them to be punished. I wanted them documented. By the time the civil case was officially filed, Ivy and Daniel had already become pariahs in their own story. The same people who once called them bold or tragically in love now used words like predator, manipulator, and thief. Their love story had rotted in public view, and I had simply handed the world a mirror to watch the decay. Within days of the suit going public, Daniel's assets were frozen. His bank accounts flagged. His last standing client terminated their contract, citing ethical conflicts and reputational harm. His name was scrubbed from his old firm's website entirely, no mention of his tenure, no trace he had ever worked there. And Ivy? She tried to reinvent herself on social media again, this time as a victim of cancel culture. But it failed. Badly. Because victims don't steal six-figure retirement accounts from their mothers. I received a message from her ex-boyfriend, years ago, the one Ivy had cheated on. He wrote, "I always knew she was capable of hurting people, but this is monstrous. I'm sorry she ever touched your life. She used to lie about you. She told us you were controlling, narcissistic. Now I know why, because you were the one thing she could never outshine." That stuck with me. Because for all her cruelty, Ivy had never actually wanted Daniel. She had wanted what I had. The life I built. The attention. The admiration. And when she couldn't have it, she destroyed it. Or so she thought. But now I was standing again, higher than ever. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. Public. Televised. The kind of televised Ivy once dreamed of for fame. Now it would air her downfall in high definition. The day of the hearing, they walked into court together for the first time in months. They looked like strangers who had been handcuffed by a mistake too big to hold. Ivy wore beige. Minimal makeup. Her face pale. She looked thin, almost ghostly. Daniel, once proud and pressed, now looked older, unshaven, jittery. The media surrounded them like wolves. And me? I stepped out of a black sedan wearing the same color Ivy had worn to steal my wedding, white. But this time it wasn't a symbol of naivety. It was war paint. Inside the courtroom, the evidence was laid out, methodically, piece by piece. My lawyer presented everything: the forged power of attorney, the suspicious account transfers, the fake business name. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, stared down at them like a disappointed mother. At one point, Ivy whispered something to Daniel, and he turned his face away from her. I didn't know what she said. I didn't care. Because whatever love existed between them had long since dried up. Now they were just co-conspirators, linked by shame, not passion. When the judge adjourned for the day, she issued a public statement: there is significant evidence of deliberate fraud, abuse of fiduciary power, and exploitation of familial trust. This court will proceed with full investigation and trial. Until that time, the accused are restricted from accessing shared funds or relocating out of state. Translation: they were trapped. No more flights to beachside villas. No more fancy dinners on my dime. No more escape. I walked out of the courtroom with cameras flashing, microphones pushed toward me. One reporter asked, "Miss Monroe, do you have anything to say to your daughter?" I looked straight into the lens. "Yes," I said. "I hope you finally understand what it feels like to be left behind." The trial date was set. 2 months away. Enough time for Daniel and Ivy to sit in silence with the consequences they created. The media was relentless now. Talk shows dissected the scandal like it was a true crime documentary, and I became a strange kind of symbol, the woman who stood at the altar alone and chose justice over forgiveness. I never asked for that spotlight. But I didn't run from it either. Sometimes, you become a symbol because someone else tried to erase you, and you refused to disappear. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Hannah Green. She used to babysit Ivy when Ivy was 10 and I was working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. Hannah was only 18 back then, soft-spoken, artistic, and kind. We lost touch after she moved to California. But her message was chilling: "Clarissa, I've been following your story. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." I found Ivy's journal back then, hidden under a loose floorboard in her room. I didn't say anything at the time, but I saved it. You need to see it. It wasn't just Daniel. She's been obsessed with becoming you for a long time. My heart sank. I agreed to meet her at a cafe just outside Savannah, away from the media, away from the eyes that never stopped watching me now. When I arrived, Hannah was waiting, her hair streaked with gray now, her eyes troubled. She slid a weathered journal across the table. "I don't know why I kept it," she said. "Maybe because I knew something wasn't right back then. But I didn't think it was my place to intervene." I opened it. The handwriting was Ivy's. Sloppy and dramatic, as it had been in childhood. But the words, they felt colder than any courtroom testimony. "Mom always acts like she's perfect. She gets everything. She gets to be beautiful, adored, talented. I wish I could rip off her skin and wear it like mine. I wish Daniel looked at me the way he looks at her. One day, he will. If I say the right things, if I make him see me, not as a child, but as a woman, he'll choose me. He'll see that I'm better. I'm younger. I'll win. She doesn't deserve all that love. I was supposed to be the main character. Not her. The entries spanned years. Long before Daniel. Long before the betrayal had a face. Ivy had been crafting this narrative since she was a child. A fantasy where she didn't just want my life, she believed it was owed to her. It wasn't just jealousy. It was obsession. I stared at the last page, dated 3 years before I ever met Daniel. She won't see it coming. And by the time she does, it'll be too late. I'll be the one he wants. I'll be the bride. I closed the journal slowly, my fingers trembling. The betrayal hadn't started with a kiss. It had started long before, rooted in something twisted and broken, something I had never seen because I was too busy loving her. I thanked Hannah, hugged her tight, and walked to my car in silence. Back home, I placed the journal on my table and stared at it. I had been trying to heal from a moment. But now I realized I was surviving a lifetime of deception. And that journal? It was going to be Exhibit A. Because the world needed to see not just what Ivy had done, but who she really was. The journal sat in my lap like a loaded weapon. I had stared at it for hours, rereading Ivy's words, her adolescent fantasies bleeding into adult delusions. It was eerie. Violent, even. Not in the way of knives or fists, but in the way someone dreams of replacing you piece by piece, until you're no longer necessary. Until you're erased. My attorney, Liza, took one look at the journal and called in a forensic psychologist. "This isn't just evidence," she said, flipping through the pages carefully with gloved fingers. "This is a roadmap to her intentions." Within 2 weeks, we filed a motion to enter the journal into evidence. The judge reviewed it privately first, protocol for sensitive psychological content. When she emerged from her chambers that day, her face looked harder than usual. "The court finds this document relevant," she said flatly. "This is no longer a matter of emotional betrayal alone. We are dealing with evidence of long-standing psychological obsession and premeditated fraud. Therefore, I am ordering a psychological evaluation for Ms. Ivy Monroe." The courtroom gasped. Ivy, seated across the aisle with her newly court-appointed attorney, because she could no longer afford her original one, went ghost white. Daniel didn't look at her. Not once. Outside the courthouse that day, reporters gathered around me again, cameras flashing. "Miss Monroe, is it true your daughter fantasized about taking your place for years?" I met their gazes without flinching. "She didn't just want what I had," I said. "She wanted me gone. And she thought love would justify theft. It never does." That night, the story took another turn. National news picked it up. Mother's Journal reveal sparks mental health investigation in viral betrayal case. Experts were interviewed. Psychologists debated Ivy's state of mind. Was she a narcissist? A trauma victim? A manipulator with sociopathic tendencies? I stayed out of that conversation. Because I knew the truth wasn't clinical. It was personal. This wasn't about labels. This was about what she did. And what she still refused to regret. The evaluation went on for 3 weeks. Court-appointed professionals interviewed Ivy, reviewed the journal, questioned her about her childhood, her relationships, her motivations. The final report came back with chilling clarity. Ms. Monroe exhibits traits of pathological envy, emotional detachment from maternal bonds, and deep-seated identity erosion stemming from her need to be viewed as superior to maternal authority. She displays selective remorse, likely performative. There are signs of narcissistic manipulation and fixation. While she is legally sane and competent to stand trial, her behavior suggests an intense, long-term fantasy of role reversal and replacement. In other words, she had wanted to be me for years. And when that wasn't enough, she took everything I had. Daniel, on the other hand, was examined too. His report read like a mask finally pulled away: charming, opportunistic, emotionally exploitive. Pattern of targeting women in subordinate or emotionally vulnerable roles. His involvement with Ms. Ivy Monroe was not incidental, it was strategic. He knew of her obsession and encouraged it to fracture her relationship with her mother for personal gain. So he hadn't been seduced. He had helped her plan it. Helped her become me. Everything clicked into place then. The extra attention. The late-night talks. The father-daughter bonding moments that I'd mistaken as sweet gestures. They were additions. Tests. He was grooming her to become what I already was, only younger. More malleable. More willing. And she was desperate to pass. The judge reviewed the findings. And when she looked up, her words echoed like thunder in the courtroom: this is no longer a simple civil matter. This is a coordinated act of emotional and financial sabotage, rooted in obsession and willful exploitation. The trial will continue. And the charges will stand. Daniel's attorney begged for a plea deal. Ivy began crying in court. But me? I didn't shed a tear. Because this wasn't grief anymore. It was justice. The letter arrived on a Monday. Unmarked envelope. No return address. Just my name written in shaky cursive across the front, as if the pen itself had hesitated before forming each letter. I almost didn't open it. I thought it was just another tabloid request, or a bitter note from someone who felt sorry for Ivy. But the handwriting stopped me. I knew it. Daniel. Inside was a single page, handwritten in ink that had smeared in places, whether from his hand or his guilt, I couldn't tell. Clarissa, I know I don't deserve a moment of your time. But I need you to know this wasn't all Ivy's idea. She told you what you wanted to hear at first, that I seduced her, that she was manipulated. But the truth is, we manipulated each other. I knew about her obsession with you. She talked about it all the time. How she wanted to be more like you. Dress like you. Take your place. I didn't think much of it at first, until I realized how far she was willing to go. And I let her. I told myself it wasn't betrayal if we didn't cross a line. And when we did, I told myself you'd be better off without me. That you'd be too hurt to look closely. But you did. And I underestimated you. Ivy forged your signature, yes, but I signed off on it. I helped her create the account. I lied to the bank. I knew exactly what we were doing. And now I know what it cost you. I'm not writing for forgiveness. I know that door is sealed. But I'll testify. I'll say everything under oath. Because I want the court to hear the truth before this destroys you even further. I may be a coward, but I won't lie under oath. Daniel, I read it twice. Then a third time. The part that hit me hardest wasn't the confession itself, it was how calculated the whole thing had been. Daniel had watched me laugh. Kissed me goodnight. Held my hand as we shopped for wedding rings. All while knowing he was building a second life with my daughter behind my back. Not because he was blinded by passion. But because he thought I'd never fight back. And now? He was afraid I'd win. My attorney, Liza, was stunned when she read it. This is the final nail, she said. If we submit this in court, not only does it prove intent, it shows collusion. And it gives us leverage to demand a full criminal plea deal. Fraud, perjury, theft. They're finished. Let him testify, I said. I want him to say it out loud. In front of Ivy. In front of everyone. She nodded. We'll submit it tomorrow. But I didn't stop there. I scanned the letter and sent a copy, anonymously, to a news outlet. Headline the next day? Groom turned fraudster confesses in handwritten letter, we manipulated her together. The media went into a frenzy. Ivy was ambushed by reporters outside her apartment, her tear-streaked face frozen across the internet. Is it true? They shouted. Did you forge the signature? Did your mother know? But the worst moment came when the full letter was read aloud in court. Daniel stood on the witness stand. Pale. Sunken. Broken. He cleared his throat and spoke with the flatness of a man who had no more games left. Yes, I helped Ivy. I knew what she was doing. I encouraged her. I witnessed the forgery. I benefited financially. And I stayed silent because I wanted what I wanted. Ivy buried her face in her hands. The courtroom fell deathly silent. The judge leaned forward. Do you understand that you are confessing to conspiracy to commit fraud, financial abuse, and aiding in identity theft? Yes, he said. I understand. And why are you confessing now? He glanced at me, just once. Because she didn't stay quiet. And I didn't think she'd survive this. The room froze. And then the judge spoke the words I'd waited months to hear. This court finds sufficient grounds for criminal prosecution on all counts. A jury will now decide the final sentence. I exhaled. Not in relief. In release. Because the man who once promised to love me forever had just confessed, under oath, to destroying me. And the daughter I raised? She watched it happen, helpless, shaking, finally seeing the truth unravel around her. The wedding I never got had been replaced with something far more powerful. Justice. And I had walked down that aisle alone, and come out stronger than either of them ever imagined. It happened outside the courthouse. The crowd was thinning, the reporters still buzzing in clusters, their cameras cooling under the gray sky. The trial was scheduled to resume the next week for closing arguments, and the air around the building felt electric, everyone waiting, watching, hungry for the next twist. I had just stepped into the parking lot, my heels clicking against the pavement, when I heard her voice. Mom. I froze. The way she said it, it wasn't the manipulative softness she used to weaponize, nor the wounded cry I had once rushed to comfort. It was sharp. Bitter. And hollow. I turned. Ivy stood there in a pale trench coat, her cheeks blotched, her hair pulled into a messy twist like she'd tried too hard to look like she didn't care. Her eyes were glassy. Not from sadness, but from fury that had nowhere else to go. I hope you're happy, she spat, voice low. You destroyed me. The words hung in the air between us like a swinging blade. You destroyed yourself, I said quietly. She laughed, cold and ugly. You just couldn't let it go, could you? You needed to be the hero. The victim. You needed the world to see me as a monster so you could feel powerful again. I stepped forward, close enough to see the trembling in her hands. I didn't need the world to see you as a monster, I said. You did that on your own. I just held up the mirror. You think I don't know what this is really about, she hissed. You're not brave. You're vindictive. You're punishing me because I took what you couldn't keep. And there it was, the truth she clung to like a crown of thorns. She still believed she had won. That Daniel had chosen her over me because she was younger, prettier, more desirable. She didn't understand that she hadn't won anything. She'd simply inherited the wreckage. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger. A woman who had clawed her way into someone else's life and thought that made it hers. Ivy, I said softly, you didn't take what I couldn't keep. You stole what you could never carry. She blinked, thrown off. Daniel didn't choose you. He used you. Just like he used me. You weren't the prize. You were the next fool. Her mouth opened, but no words came. So I kept going. You don't get to rewrite this story anymore. Not in the courtroom. Not in the press. And not here. You had a choice. Do you remember that? You could have come to me. You could have told the truth. You could have stopped. But you didn't. A tear slid down her cheek, but her jaw stayed clenched. She hated crying. Always had. Saw it as weakness. I used to teach her otherwise. She hadn't listened. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to survive you. She stood frozen as I turned to walk away. I didn't look back. Not when she whispered my name, not when I heard her heel scuff the ground, not when she said, almost too faint to hear, "You're just like him." I paused. Then turned my head slightly. "No," I said. "That's why I walked away. And you didn't." And then I left her there. Alone in the place she helped burn down. Because this wasn't her story anymore. It was mine. And the ending? Would be mine to write. The courtroom was silent. Not in that distracted, buzzing way where people still whisper behind hands or scroll quietly on their phones. This was real silence. Heavy. Expectant. The kind that prickles across skin and settles in the pit of your stomach. I could hear my own breath as I stood and walked to the podium. The judge nodded. "Miss Monroe, you may deliver your impact statement." I looked out across the courtroom. Daniel sat at the defense table, slouched, his face a blank, graying canvas. Ivy sat upright but tight, her arms folded like armor, her eyes red but dry. Reporters filled the benches. A few jurors looked at me with quiet sympathy. Others with disbelief, as if they still couldn't believe a mother and daughter could end up on opposite sides of a courtroom, separated by betrayal instead of blood. I took a breath. And I began. When I was 8 years old, my mother taught me how to sew. I remember pricking my finger the first time and crying. She said, "If you want something to hold together, you have to bleed a little for it." I didn't know then that life would require me to bleed a lot. I loved my daughter. I loved the man I planned to marry. I built my life on the belief that love, real love, was enough. That loyalty would protect me. That if I gave and gave and gave, I'd never be the one left with nothing. I was wrong. I paused. The people sitting before you didn't just betray me. They erased me. They stole from me. Lied to my face. Smiled while doing it. They took not just my money, but my identity, my motherhood, my dreams. They walked into the future I designed, and left me choking in the ashes. I saw one of the jurors, a woman in her 50s, wipe a tear from her cheek. And when I found out, they told me to be quiet. To move on. To forgive. But silence is not strength. And some wounds deserve to be seen. I am not asking this court to avenge me. I'm asking it to recognize that crimes committed in the name of love are still crimes. That stealing from your mother is not a mistake, it's a choice. That forging signatures, draining retirement funds, gaslighting, manipulating, and betraying the very person who gave you life, should not be explained away by youth, or grief, or lust. I will rebuild. I already am. But I ask this court to make it clear, what they did was not just a scandal. It was not just a broken wedding. It was a deliberate, orchestrated act of cruelty. And it must have consequences. I looked straight at Ivy. She didn't look away. "I loved you more than I ever loved myself. And that's what made this the kind of betrayal that never fully heals. You didn't just hurt me. You changed me." I turned back to the judge. "Thank you." I stepped away. The courtroom was still silent. Even the judge had to clear her throat twice before continuing. What followed was procedural, final arguments, closing remarks, but none of it mattered the way that moment had. I had taken back my voice. Spoken the words I'd buried for too long. When the judge called for recess before the jury deliberated, Daniel was the first to leave the courtroom. But Ivy stayed seated. Head bowed. Frozen. Not crying. Not apologizing. Just empty. The jury took less than 4 hours. That in itself said everything. I sat alone on the bench that day, no legal team beside me, no friends or family around me, just a quiet resolve settled deep in my chest. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't praying. I was ready. Not because I knew what the verdict would be, but because I finally knew who I was without them. The bailiff entered. All rise. The jury filed in. 12 strangers who had seen every photo, heard every recording, read every forged signature. They'd witnessed Daniel's confession. They'd seen Ivy's journal. They'd watched me testify and then watched Ivy sit in silence like the words didn't belong to her. The foreperson stood. The judge nodded. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? We have, Your Honor. She handed over a sheet of paper. The judge read it silently, her mouth a tight line. Then she looked up, calm, grave, final. In the matter of financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud, we find the defendants, Daniel Cross and Ivy Monroe, guilty on all charges. Ivy gasped. She wasn't prepared. Even now, especially now, she had clung to the delusion that being my daughter would save her. That blood meant immunity. That her tears would mean something. But justice, when it finally arrives, does not care how many lullabies you once sang or birthday candles you once blew out. Daniel didn't react. Just dropped his head, as if he had been waiting for this day his entire life. The judge tapped her gavel once. Sentencing was immediate. Mr. Cross, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with an additional 2 years probation following your release. You will be ordered to repay the full amount stolen from Ms. Monroe, with interest. Ms. Ivy Monroe, due to your direct involvement, forged documents, and lack of cooperation or remorse, you are sentenced to 2 years in a rehabilitation facility for criminal offenders, followed by mandatory supervised release and full restitution. The room stayed silent. Ivy turned slowly to look at me as if searching for mercy on my face. There was none. Not anymore. Because what she never understood is that I had already forgiven her. In the deepest, most painful way, I had let go of the daughter I once had. And I had no intention of ever knowing the woman who replaced her. The judge turned to me once more. Miss Monroe, is there anything you wish to say before sentencing concludes? I stood. My voice didn't shake. Only this. I came here not to see them fall, but to show myself I could rise. I am not their victim. I am the ending they never planned for. And I hope this courtroom remembers that sometimes, survival is its own kind of sentence. The judge nodded slowly, like someone offering a silent bow. With that, court was adjourned. The gavel struck. And it was over. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I changed the locks on my front door, not because I feared they'd return, but because I wanted that symbolic click, the sound of everything they once touched being shut out. I replaced the guest room furniture, where Daniel once stayed. I donated the old photo frames. I even painted over the accent wall Ivy had helped me choose during her last summer home. I wasn't erasing the past. I was reclaiming it. One quiet decision at a time. The press eventually moved on. Another scandal. Another headline. But pieces of the story still lingered like ghosts, people whispering in grocery store aisles, women catching my eye and mouthing, "You're that woman." And I didn't flinch. I wasn't ashamed. I had walked through hell in heels and come out standing taller than before. I took walks again. Read novels again. Started a small design blog where I wrote not just about color palettes, but about restoration, of homes, of hearts, of dignity. To my surprise, people began writing back. Women. Mothers. Betrayed wives. Abandoned daughters. They shared stories that mirrored mine, some darker, some quieter, all bruised by betrayal in some way. I thought I was alone until I found your story, one woman wrote. Another, you taught me that silence is not the same as peace. They didn't know it, but their words were stitching me back together. Ivy never reached out again. Not even from the facility. The state mailed me the first restitution check, small, almost insulting, but it came with a note in her handwriting. Just 2 words, I understand. I burned it. Because understanding doesn't undo what was done. And I had nothing left to offer her but distance. Daniel, I heard, was trying to cut a plea deal for early release. He won't get it. His sentence is public, and his reputation buried too deep. I no longer hate him. I feel nothing. And that's the true victory, not that he's behind bars, but that he no longer lives in my head. Some nights, I still wake up and stare at the ceiling, remembering the day I stood in that white dress, bouquet in hand, waiting for a man who never came. I used to replay it with grief, but now? Now I see a woman who stood in that silence and didn't fall apart. I see a woman who didn't just survive betrayal. She rewrote the ending. Before we begin, if you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel for more stories that speak truth into the silence. And let me ask, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country below. I'd love to know how far this story traveled. Now, let me take you to the final chapter. The invitation was simple. Cream cardstock, gold foil lettering, no fluff, no lace. It read, "You are cordially invited to join Clarissa Monroe for a celebration of reclamation and restoration." No bride. No groom. Just a woman standing exactly where she belongs. Location? The same wedding hall. Same hour. Same aisle. 1 year later, to the day. I had thought about skipping the anniversary entirely. Thought about traveling, disappearing for a while, doing anything to avoid the ghost of that day. But ghosts don't go away when you run. They vanish when you stand and face them. So I rented the venue. I didn't invite everyone, just those who had stayed. My lawyer, Liza. Dana, the journalist who never let the story die in silence. Hannah, the babysitter who gave me the journal that changed everything. And women I'd never met in person, followers from my blog, survivors from other cities, women who brought their daughters and their stories and their strength. And I stood in front of them wearing a slate gray dress. Not mourning. Not bridal. Just mine. I walked down that aisle, alone again, but not abandoned this time. I didn't hold a bouquet. I held a microphone. And this is what I said. 1 year ago, I stood in this room waiting for a man who never showed. I was humiliated. Betrayed. And left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought I understood. But today, I don't stand here as a bride. I stand here as a woman who survived. Who spoke. Who refused to disappear. And most importantly, who learned that the most sacred vows we can ever make are the ones we make to ourselves. I pulled a small piece of paper from my pocket and unfolded it. On it were the vows I had written the night before. I vow to protect my peace, even if it means walking away from people I once loved. I vow to trust my voice, especially when the world tells me to stay quiet. I vow to stop making myself smaller so others can feel bigger. And I vow to never again confuse betrayal for bravery, or silence for grace. The room was silent. And then someone began to clap. And another. And another. And before I knew it, I was surrounded by standing ovations, by women with tears in their eyes, by people who understood exactly what it meant to lose everything, only to gain yourself. As I stepped down from the platform, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, ran up to me and asked shyly, "Are you the lady who got left at the wedding?" I knelt to her level. "No," I said, smiling. "I'm the lady who kept going." She grinned and nodded like she understood something most adults still don't. Because this story wasn't about a stolen man, or a broken daughter, or even a ruined wedding. It was about one woman who refused to be erased. And instead of walking down the aisle to someone else, she walked straight back to herself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt something, if you saw yourself in any part of it, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. And one last time, where are you listening from? I'd love to hear your voice, because every story is stronger when it's shared. Until the next one. This was Clarissa Monroe. And this time, I said I do to me.